Everyone, we are fortunate to be joined by friend of the show, Dr. Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you guys.
So we just played for the audience, Marco Rubio and Mike Johnson, both saying, no, the imminent threat came from the fact that we knew Israel was going to attack Iran, regardless of whether we involved ourselves. We knew that would put our U.S. service members at risk. Therefore, we felt compelled to strike Iran first. Your reaction to those extraordinary revelations?
I'm delighted that he has spelled it out, that this is the reason, that at the end of the day, the Israelis have been driving the boat on this one, and that the United States has followed their lead and let them decide when the U.S. goes to war and when it doesn't. This is, at the end of the day, a decision they made. They made a decision to let the Israelis decide, and now they're trying to hide behind that as if that is some sort of a self-defense. At this point, there's no speculation valid any longer as to whether Israel is the driving force behind this or not. It is coming out of the mouth of Rubio, and it's coming out of the mouth of the Speaker of the House as well. It is now clear. This is what they decided. This is not, by any definition, America first. This is Israel first.
This is probably the most consequential Kinsley gaffe in American history, where they accidentally, tell the truth. And this is one where I really don't even know where to go from here. I do think it is worth noting that the administration has laid out the most maximalist goals and is now making a mockery of America first. Let's say, put A6, let's say, up there on the screen. I really loved this exchange. So Matt Walsh over at the Daily Wire, he put out a tweet. He's like, I've got some questions about this whole operation. And Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt released a statement and said, let me reiterate all of the objectives. We're going to destroy the regime's missile, raise our missile industry to the ground. We're going to annihilate the Navy. We're going to ensure the regime's terrorist proxies can no longer operate. We will stop them from making and using IEDs. And when, by the way, IED literally means improvised. So, okay. Guarantee that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. Preventing the regime from threatening America. Killing terrorists is good. And there's a long continued diatribe. I was like, whenever she was meant to address concerns about regime change, this is a regime change manifesto. I don't see any way that there could be a realistic off-ramp without effective surrender from the Trump administration. Curious for your view.
So here's what I think has happened. I think, first of all, you're right, but here's, I think, how we got here. The administration was led by the Israelis to believe that this was going to be a very simple operation. They thought that by Sunday evening, this would have been wrapped up, that the regime would have imploded as a result of the assassination of the supreme leader. That obviously did not work. Twice, reportedly perhaps even 3 times, Trump reached out and tried to see if he could get a ceasefire from the Iranians. The Iranians rejected it. And I can go into as to why the Iranians rejected it. So now they're stuck in a situation in which they understand that the Iranian game plan is to prolong this and expand this war and play to what their relative strength is, which is they can withstand this, whereas Trump probably cannot, not militarily, but politically. He cannot withstand this for a couple of weeks. So now the Trump administration is trying to essentially convince the Iranians that no, the United States is more than ready to withstand this for a long time. He suddenly said 4 weeks. And that now, as a result of the Iranians refusing a ceasefire, he is going even more maximalist. So he is throwing good money after bad money after his first completely unrealistic expectation was not met. And this is the very definition of losing control. We're not even 2 or 3 days into the war, and it's already clear they have lost control. Look at how they are grasping for straws, not just to find what objectives they should have, but also how to justify them. And in that effort, they have gone as far as to say that Iran is at war with civilization, to actually admitting that all of this was done because Israel decided it was time to go.
So I want to go back to why Trump let himself be led around by the nose by Israel, because clearly there was some reluctance from the administration. They were concerned. You had the top military brass here leaking to basically every newspaper they could get a hold of to say, this is a real problem. We are not ready. There's an interceptor issue. This is not going to go well. There's tremendous risks here. And yet, in spite of all of that, and in spite of all of the very clear campaign promises that, we're going to play them later, he made, J.D. Vance made, Tulsi Gabbard made, RFK Jr. made, Stephen Miller made, like every top person in this administration said, oh, of course, we're not going to go to war with Iran. In spite of all of that, he still ends up making the decision to do Israel's bidding. Like, what can explain that? Is it just the power of the Israel? Is it Miriam Adelson money? Like, how does this calculation get made when you have so many people, from the political people to the military people, warning that this is going to be a disaster?
It's really difficult to explain, and I absolutely cannot claim to have an answer. I think a part of the answer, though, is he has been lulled into this belief that everything he has done has been an absolutely amazing success, and everything he did was in contradiction to the conventional wisdom and their advice. They
Mm.
told him that he can't move the embassy. He did. Nothing happened. They told him that he couldn't recognize the Golan Heights. He did. Nothing happened. They told him you can't kill Soleimani. He did. In his view, nothing happened. They told him that he can't take out Fordo. He did. In his view, nothing happened. And then, of course, he did Venezuela. He's on this massive sugar high, the mother of all sugar highs, and it made it easier for the Israelis under those circumstances to tell him, look, the Iranians are just so weak. All you need to do is push a little bit. You're going to be the hero. You're going to be the president that finally puts an end to this regime. Everyone said that you can't do it. That's precisely why you should do it, because only you can prove them wrong.
So what you mentioned,
Maybe they mocked up a newspaper cover like
Yeah.
Zoran did.
I mean, they
Well,
played to his psychology. The
Right.
Iranians did not.
right. Yeah, right. And we should say that, is we should fault their negotiating team as well. But now we are where we are. And so, what do you see? You said that the Iranians have rejected 2, maybe 3 diplomatic overtures from the Trump administration. What is the internal logic inside of the regime right now? It seems pretty clear that they expected to take mass casualties at the top. They have decentralized military command. What is their internal assessment right now, from far as you can tell, from how they're doing and for what they're planning?
The first thing we have to say to truly understand how they're thinking is that they truly, unlike the Israelis who oftentimes throw out and say, oh, this is existential for them, this truly is existential. And this is why they're making the decisions the way they're making it. They believe that a premature ceasefire, one in which after the US has scored a major victory, if they were to accept it, all it would do, it would allow the US and Israel to regroup, remobilize, and then 6 months later, relaunch a war. If there's to be a ceasefire, it has to be a prolonged and durable one. The only way the ceasefire could be durable, they believe, is if this war ends up being tremendously costly to all sides, so that all sides believe it was a mistake to start it, and as a result, believe it would be a mistake to restart it. If they agree to a ceasefire too quickly, without that cost actually being felt, they believe that it will only give the other side, the US and Israel, time to be able to regroup and then once again attack Iran. This is the conclusion they drew after agreeing to a ceasefire in June. Many of them believe that it was premature. Many of them believe that the Israelis were in a very, very bad situation because they had run out of interceptors, and it was a mistake for the Iranians to agree to that ceasefire, and they're paying for that mistake now.
I mean, that was another incredible moment from Rubio, is he also talked about that interceptor
He
map.
admitted it.
Yeah, he talked about, they've got these drones and they're very inexpensive, and meanwhile we're shooting all these interceptors. They can make the drones much more quickly than we can make the interceptors. It's like, okay, then why are we doing this if that's math that
And
you're
once
aware
you're
of?
in this situation and you recognize that logic, which they should have recognized before, it actually pushes them to go all out as well. And that is what I think we're going to see in the next couple of days. Trump is going to throw everything he has.
Tell me more about what you mean by that. And just to, as a little preamble here, we can put A9 up on the screen. We now know at least 6 Americans have been killed in action. At least 18 have been seriously wounded. You have U.S. embassies that are being attacked in a number of countries, both by Iran and also by local people. We know now, we have confirmation that U.S. Marines were shooting at civilian rioters at the U.S. embassy in Karachi in Pakistan. We can put A11 up on the screen. So already the Strait of Hormuz was sort of de facto closed because the insurers pulled the plug on shipping traffic and said, basically, we're not going to insure you, or we're going to jack up the price extraordinarily. Now, Reuters is reporting Iran is notifying vessels it is officially closing the Strait of Hormuz. If officially closed, 20+ million barrels of oil per day will be impacted, 20% of global supply. Qatar has cut off their LNG production. Gas prices in Europe have already skyrocketed some 50%. So when you say we're going to throw everything that we have at it and we're going to go big, what does that actually in effect look like?
Let me start off by just saying one other thing that I think is important. Just a couple of days, about 3 days before Trump decided to start this war. I was in a closed meeting with a bunch of former officials, analysts, military people, and the general view in the room was the Iranians would never do this. They would never close the straits. They would never attack the GCC states. It would be too
Wow.
costly for them. And I think
Wow.
it reflected the fact that this had not really dawned upon people. The manner in which Trump is doing this is making a clear signal to the Iranians this is an existential fight. And in an existential fight, they're not going to think about tomorrow. They're not going to think about what GCC Iran relations are going to be a year from now. They're going to think about how they survive this war. And as a result, decisions that were perceived to be unthinkable, just empty threats from the Iranians, we are now seeing happening on a daily basis. As you pointed out, the closing of the straits. And
Yeah,
again, I think it shows the profound miscalculation, although, of course, those people in the room were not the decision makers. I think it reflects what also decision makers have been thinking about this. I think what is happening now is that because of this essential, I wouldn't call it panic, but really scrambling to try to figure out a new plan, the emphasis is going to be to throw everything at the Iranians. I think we're going to see significant bombardment. We're going to see an effort to use the Kurds in order to launch attacks in the Kurdish areas. In the absence of other ground troops, although I wouldn't be surprised if there may be some Israeli ground troops with the Kurds, although the Kurdish numbers are not very high. It's not so much that this actually would end up becoming like a real invasion, but something that would be further effort to try to cause Tehran to lose control of the larger situation. If the Iranians are trying to expand the theater of war into areas that the US wasn't ready for, the US is responding in kind. But bottom line is, we're seeing that the original plans didn't even survive the first 5 seconds of reality.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, already this is a full-blown regional conflict, which, as you said, and by the way, Trump admitted, you don't just have to listen to you, we were surprised that they attacked the Gulf countries. He has caused absolute chaos. The State Department saying this morning, all citizens in the Gulf should leave, all of them. By the way, good luck leaving. All of the airports are closed. The U.S. ambassador, Mike Huckabee, is putting out guidance about how to get on a bus from Israel to the Sinai Peninsula and then hopefully be able to catch a flight from there to somewhere else before they can eventually get the hell out. There's over 1 million Americans who live in the region. I used to be one of them. But sticking with that, sir, let's put A10 up here on the screen just so you can already see huge strikes in the middle of Tehran, in the middle of daylight. I mean, God only knows the number of people that have already been killed, but many of the reports coming out of Iran saying that the Israeli strikes are specifically targeting these police stations. As you said, the internal logic right now for the Gulf and for the United States is that this is already intolerable from a munitions depletion standpoint for interceptors, which means that they have to go all out, bombard the country as much as humanly possible, and try to basically erode their capacity to fight. This is the North Vietnam bombing strategic logic of many, many decades. Of course, it doesn't work if you have a population and a regime which is hardened in its belief that it is completely existential. So let's say we do get this massive bombardment, an effective trying to collapse the state. Let's say they do take out the missile launchers. What's next from that point? Because the regime itself will still be intact, and it's not like Trump and Israel can just declare victory.
Again, I don't think there is much of a plan. The hope was that now they're targeting a lot of police stations, IRGC headquarters, Basij headquarters. The hope is that this eventually will lead to a regime implosion because the repressive capabilities of the state will be eroded, and then magically people will rise up and take over. And there is some basis to believe that something like this could happen. To bet an entire war that it will happen is a completely different story. And I go back to what I said on this show several times. I repeat it as often as I could in every interview. Trump has been led to believe that Iran is much weaker than it is. And as a result, he's gone down this path. And now we're discovering that it is not that simple. As you mentioned, the problems for people, for Americans to leave the GCC states, even leaving Israel at this point. I spoke to a friend who was traveling. He was in Dubai, can't get out, had to take a cab all the way to Oman. The border to Oman between the UN and Oman was just completely overloaded with people trying to escape Dubai and try to find a flight out of the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah.
Clearly, no planning whatsoever from any side for this to be able to happen, yet the writing was on the wall.
Well, I mean, we've been listening to Professor Robert Pape, who's an expert on warfare and air power in particular. In 100 years of trying this, there has never been a successful regime change just using air power. We also have the recent example of Gaza, which obviously is much smaller, and where the Israelis, with our assistance, bombed the hell of it out of it, reduced it all to rubble effectively, and had a ground invasion, and still were not able to dislodge Hamas from power. So the arrogance, the delusion here is just extraordinary to me as someone who was not expert on these things whatsoever. Last question I had for you is, I was watching that bombardment of Tehran, looking at the fact that they've already targeted some 9 hospitals. Obviously, little girls massacred, over 160 of them at a school. Another school, I think a girls' volleyball team was killed. Are they, since the initial let's try to collapse the regime didn't work out, are they now going to pursue effectively the same strategy they pursued in Gaza?
It appears that at least on a couple of occasions that has happened. We've seen evidence of double tap attacks. There's a video of an Iranian woman who actually doesn't live in Iran. I don't know if she's Iranian American, who is crying and said that they struck this hotel. When people rushed in to try to help it, they struck again. So evidence of these double taps are now emerging.
Yeah.
One thing I have to say, though, and I'm sorry to raise this, but I was on BBC last night and they aired tapes or reconstruction of tapes of 3 voices from Iran that they claim to have spoken to, who all were praising these bombings. I mean, one of them were saying that, we're applauding every time we hear a bomb. Without a doubt, I do believe that there is some level of support inside of Iran for this campaign. Certainly, there's a degree of support, although I think it's exaggerated in the diaspora. But BBC aired 3 voices who all said the same thing, giving the viewers the impression that this is a liberation war, that the people inside of Iran are just yearning to be bombed. And I had to call them out on it. I said, this is worse than the Iraq war propaganda that I've seen, because you know very well that there's a diversity of views inside the country, yet you only aired one type of a voice and give people the impression that everyone is welcoming this war, which is absolutely not the case.
Yeah, that's outrageous. And we've been watching this happen in our own country. There are 92 million people in Iran. 92 million. Did 3 maybe? Maybe. What about the rest? How do we have any idea? And how have we not seen this story? I've seen plenty of videos.
Stunned.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of videos, I'm sure you have too, of like secular looking people who are like, we will stand and fight to the death against the United States and against Israel in the streets of Tehran. Could be selective regime propaganda. I'm not going to take that fully as the only voice, but of course, that voice exists too. It's completely irresponsible to say that it doesn't. And at this point, I mean, the history of nationalism, even in countries which are being externally bombed with, external pressure to be applied, many are not willing to just play ball with the imperial aggressor. But even if they do disagree with the internal politics, which is quite literally the story of Iraq. I mean, I guess the final thing that we wanted to talk to you a little bit about here is with this logic along the escalation ladder, the consuming of the Gulf states. Every story, top Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, is interceptors are running out in the Gulf. By the way, even these Gulf guys, I mean, I'm reading stories, they're shooting Patriot $4 million missiles at Shahed drones, which cost $20,000. They're going to be out within a week, maybe a month. We don't exactly know the number. If that happens and we see a conflagration, already Saudi Aramco is under threat. They're saying that they're going to avoid the Straits of Hormuz, move oil through the Red Sea via a pipeline. Qatar LNG has already shut down. Iran saying this morning they may even attack Europe. When we see a depletion of that and we see this actually globalize into a major war, what does that look like from a global perspective, and not only impact on the United States, but broadly for a regional and global picture for our geopolitics?
We don't know, because the planners didn't think this through. I mean, this is truly unprecedented. The Iranians have struck or tried to strike Cyprus, where the Brits have been using a base that was extremely active in the genocide against Gaza. But apparently also had played a role in some of the attacks on Iran. It may also be a retaliation for the Brits allowing Garcia to be used by the United States after first having resisted. The Iranians cannot reach that, so perhaps they struck the Cyprus base short of that. But we also see what's now happening between Europe and Russia. Europe is now putting pressure on the Ukrainians to allow Russian gas and oil to come into Europe, because now they're suffering from an astute fuel shortage that has been made much, much worse because of this war. I mean, life as a vassal is clearly not particularly easy, since you have put your own destiny in the hands of someone else. But the Europeans chose to become vassals of the United States in this matter and not paying the price for it. Now, will this then eventually lead to a scenario in which the Russians and the Chinese, one way or another, are also dragged into it? The conventional wisdom has always been that the Russians, or at least the Chinese, will do everything they can to stay out of this. The Russians are not going to jeopardize their prospects for a deal to end the Ukraine war in order to help the Iranians. But if this expands in an uncontrollable way, then we cannot say exactly what the response of some of these other countries will be. We're also seeing right now other things. We're seeing that in Bahrain, there are riots taking place. There's some reports that the Saudis have stepped into Bahrain again to clamp down on those protesters, as they did in 2011. Bahrain, of course, used to be Iranian territory. It's majority Shia. So we're already seeing the kind of repercussions that most people thought would only happen in the worst case scenario. We're 3 days into it. We're already in the worst case scenario in that sense.
Unbelievable. Just absolutely unbelievable. Dr. Parsi, thank you as always.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.